And today we're working with the small intestines. I'll just hold my nose, something happening in my nose. And these are, people think of these as kind of a tube, and that's kind of it. But a good proportion of our immune system is in the small intestines. It's full of all of these microbiome, more microbiome than us, and it's a big area. It's the area directly behind the navel, going out in all directions. It actually looks a bit similar to the brain. It's lots of intermingling tubes, and the brain looks a bit like that as well. And as soon as I drop into the small intestines, it has this very baby-like quality, and also very grounded and early childhood. But we're also going to look at the function of the small intestines in embryology, and this feeling of being, who are we, this feeling of sitting into ourselves and also being nurtured. A lot of people meditate around the navel center, and it's a center that connects the universe, but it's very grounded and a bit like sitting into yourself. And this is the navel is the energy point for the small intestines, and I will be describing why that is through embryology. When the egg is first fertilized, it starts reproducing, and it produces 3 layers, and one layer is the ectoderm, which turns into the spinal cord, the brain, and also the skin, the nervous system. And then you've got the mesoderm, which turns into the paired organs and many different things. And then forwards from that, you've got the endoderm, which is just a tube, and it's the whole digestive tract. And in the lower part, the mid to lower part of that tube, you've got what will become the small intestines. But prior to that, prior to the gut tube being there, what you have is actually more like 2 layers, the ectoderm and the mesoderm, and then the 3rd layer, the endoderm. Before it's the GI tract, it's the yolk. It's the yolk is before the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord's got blood flowing through it, and obviously connected to the baby's heart, because it's the baby's heart that's pumping it back and forth to the placenta. But before the advent of that, you've got the yolk feeding the baby as it's growing. And this isn't feeding into the heart. You don't want to feed yolk into the heart. This is feeding directly into the, well, what happens is that yolk splits in 2. Half becomes internal and becomes the GI tract, and then the other half, from where the small intestines are, it makes this tube coming out to the other side of the yolk, which is outside of the baby. So the yolk changes from being part of the baby to being the GI tract, and then a tube going out to the yolk outside of yourself. And in that divide, there's the sense of suddenly you as different to what's feeding you. Before that, the yolk was part of you, and then all of a sudden it divides and half becomes your digestive tract and the other half is the yolk. And you even though you don't have a brain and an intellect, you have the experience of you've moved, and there's a sense of you and a sense of what is feeding you. And this goes through our whole lives, kind of who are we and what's feeding us. You know, we need a job, we need food, we need somewhere to live, and all of these things. And primarily that yolk is coming directly into what becomes the small intestine. So there's this deep connection between the small intestines and the yolk. And as the yolk gets smaller and smaller and feeding the fetus, out from the same area is growing the umbilical cord, but it doesn't have the arteries and veins yet. It is just an area growing, and it's all growing out of what will become the navel. So in the very first part, the navel is to do with the small intestines. In the very first instance, the navel is to do with the small intestines. And as the yolk is shrinking and getting smaller, all of the organs are changing, and at a certain point the small intestines are pressed out of the body and they spread out into what will become the umbilical cord and out into the tube that's moving into the yolk, and it's like a DNA strand. It's two tubes, it's a loop, and it's two tubes, and it starts to spiral. First it turns 90 degrees, then it turns another 270 degrees. So it starts gyrating around. This is about 6 weeks. And then gradually that starts moving back inside until about the 3rd month, and that whole spiraling goes inside, and that continues to coil to make all of these coiling tubes that become the small intestines. But as that comes back inside, the yolk is slowly disappearing, and the whole function is moving from the abdomen, from the small intestines to the heart, and it produces the arteries and veins that are going to the placenta, and then the placenta is filtering the blood from the mother. And the placenta is part of the baby. The baby, as a baby, we have far more anatomy. The placenta is our DNA. The amniotic sac and amnion fluid is part of us. The umbilical cord is part of us. And our heart is pumping the blood all the way to the placenta, where it's picking up oxygen and giving away carbon dioxide and toxins, and also picking up nutriments which flow back to the heart and around the baby's body. Now, if you can't remember this, don't worry. Just let it run through you as an experience, because we know this on an experiential level. I'm just giving you the background, so when we go into the meditation, you'll have a visualization of it that you can do. And if I'm not getting it 100% correct, I'm sorry. If you read different, that's okay. But you know, I've just looked at the videos of the embryology. I can never remember the names, but there's many. It's viewed in many ways that aren't correct from what I understand of the anatomy. So the baby's body, even though you've got all this extra anatomy as the placenta, which is huge, you know, compared to the baby, it's a big thing, and the umbilical cord, and then this whole lining of the amniotic sac and all that amniotic fluid, it's a lot there. But the nervous system doesn't extend out of the baby. The nervous system doesn't extend into the umbilical cord or into the placenta or the amniotic sac. So it has a different felt sense and will be discarded at birth, but it is still very much part of the baby. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm listening to this audio book called The Rocket Boys. For some reason it's reminding me of a rocket where you've got the capsule on top and it's got this big body, but at a certain point it just breaks off from the body, and one part goes one way and then this little head bit just trucks off on its own. So it's a bit like that. It's a means towards an end, but it's very much part of the baby, and obviously to do with the baby's survival, because it's like the sum of all of the organs and the lungs, because it's providing all of the nutrition and taking away all of the toxins. So it's, you know, it's kind of like the sum total of all of our organs and the mouth and the breath and everything, really. And suddenly at a certain point it is disconnected, and you connect to the mother's breath for food all of a sudden, and you connect to the breath through the nose. And at that point our awareness and our consciousness and our way of being nurtured moves from the navel to the mouth and nose. So what was happening at the navel is now happening in the face, and this movement of the mouth in holographic breathing in a way very similar to the function of the navel and connecting to the blood supply and the nutrients flowing back and forth through the navel. And the point for the small intestines is the navel, and in the mouth the point for the small intestines is the middle of the tongue and the middle of the roof of the mouth, which is being pressed together on the nipple to get the milk supply through the nipple. And in holographic breathing, the lips being sealed, that is a memory from birth, that we can have our lips closed, they can be sealed, and they will just stay in that position, and the tongue can suckle itself to the roof of the mouth and it can stay in that position. And then you get this movement and dynamic that is bringing food in through the mouth. And it's very, in the face, the points are the same points as the navel, and it changes to this function in the mouth of suckling, and that's what we have in holographic breathing. It needs to be sealed, because if it's not sealed, that suctioning and suckling motion doesn't work. And as that all starts to work, then it physically starts orchestrating the breathing motion of the bones through the face, through the cranium, through the spine, through the musculature and whole body. So as you can see, holographic breathing is a deep and refined breath work that keys into the whole universe at its very roots. And it all needs to be in place. The lips need to be relaxed and closed. The tongue needs to be relaxed on the roof mouth. If the seal breaks, then that action doesn't work, and that whole transformation through the whole body doesn't work. So there's a depth to this and a creation. Then that releases up into the nasal passageway, which is more to do with the heart, and then the maxillary sinuses, more to do with the lungs. So with our normal breathing, either with mouth breathing, which apparently isn't very good for you, well, which isn't very good for you, or you're breathing through the nose, which is better for you. But in holographic breathing, we still include this movement of the mouth. So it engages the whole abdomen. It engages the small intestines. It engages all of the GI tract in a physical and energetic way. It engages the heart and lungs and the eyes relating to the brain. So the whole manifestation of holographic breathing, this, even though they're kind of skipped over as a tube that your food goes through, it is very much there at the beginning of time for us in this life. And that change from being one, of being our food and us, to being us and being fed by another. And first of all, it is the yolk sac outside of our body rather than in our body, and then it is the placenta and mother. But that's all coming in at the navel as nourishment at the navel and being fed by another at the navel, and that is an energy center to be fed from the universe. And on an energy level with holographic breathing, the nasal passageways and the sinuses are very much to do with prana on one level, but this integral movement of the mouth that we do is drawing in energy on a more physical, fundamental level from the universe and subtle realms. That's why when I teach holographic breathing, I say, notice how nurturing it feels. The physical motion of the mouth gives a kind of a physical nurturing feeling, that you feel it going into every cell. The experience of the air coming in through the nose and turning into breath and prana has a different quality to it. But we're activating this in the mouth, and that activates the energies of the abdomen, and in what we're working with today activates the small intestines. And even though they're not an organ, they seem to just be a tube, are there at a very primary or primordial stage in our existence. So we're going to spend quite a lot of time getting used to the small intestines and the energies of the small intestines, because it's often quite easily to skip through, and I think it can be quite confronting to people, just the energy of it, because it is so much, not just early in womb life, it's also to do with very early childhood and to do with suckling. It's just moved from the navel to the mouth, and from the placenta and the mother internally to the mouth and the mother externally.